Namaste. Good evening, everyone. When we started this Hindu Youth Awards for this year, we wanted to celebrate 75 years of India's independence. Azadi Ka Mahotsav, Amrit Mahotsav. And our goal was to inspire the next generation of youth leaders, inspired by Hindu philosophy, by Vedantic philosophy, and be proud of our heritage. So when we were looking for speakers, we looked and found someone who's a world-renowned thought leader, problem solver, futurist, and mentor in the fields of business and technology. He's also my senior from IIT Kharagpur, a grad 2 degrees from MIT, and one of the most renowned partners of McKinsey. But what differs in his bio is his inspiration from our ancient philosophy. What he excels in is advising strategy amongst a wide diversity of companies and organizations and country leaders. He is one of the founders of Boston Pledge and recently supported IIT Kharagpur in launching the Academy of Leadership, which fuses Eastern and Western philosophies. His clients view him as a creative problem solver and a visionary leader. Winner of many prestigious awards, he's spoken around the world and given 250 keynote speeches on different subjects, from philosophy to problem solving, strategy to leadership, and published more than 24 articles on those subjects. It's my pleasure, it's my honor to introduce my senior and one of the most inspirational speakers who not only makes us proud of our heritage, of our culture, who makes us proud of our heritage where spirituality and science, devotion and digitalization are not at conflict. Hinduism is a way of life, and he will speak about inspiring the next generation of our leaders. Please join me in welcoming Partho S. Ghosh. Thank you, Partho.
Hello, good evening. It is a very touching afternoon that we have witnessed so far, talking about a subject which has been very, very dear to my heart for many, many years, since my childhood, growing up in Calcutta. And more I realize what we talk about our religion, about our country, about the world, more I feel that we have a very important role to play, not for India, not for the Indian community, but for the global civilization. So first, before I begin, I want to let you know the subject that I chose to speak on at the beginning and what I would like to speak to you now would be different, because of what I learned in the last 1.5 hours was tremendous. The last performance was tremendous. It gave me a new feeling of energy. And being in Houston, when you think of energy, we think of Houston. And I could feel this energy in this room, in this platform. So I first thought I'll talk about some of my own experience of Indian philosophy and how I have celebrated that in 30 different countries, which I had the privilege to serve. But now I will change the title of what I'll discuss today. And the title is Civilization is at the point of inflection, and relevance of Vedic or Hindu philosophy in the 21st century and beyond. And all of you have that responsibility to create the next phase of the development of the civilization. As you could hear from the mantras, the shastras that were recited today only, when we talk about Hinduism, all the mantras are not meant for India, it's meant for the world, it's meant for the universe. We talk about the divine energy for the universe. And I think what we have to celebrate, it is our responsibility to take that energy to help shape the next phase of our civilization. So the topic today is indeed civilization at the point of inflection and the relevance of Hinduism in the 21st century and beyond. And that's what I would like to discuss. And it would be an extempo because that was not what I prepared, but I will draw on some of the notes I did take to elaborate the thoughts that we want to celebrate together. Before I begin, I also want to, with the very deepest sense, I really mean very deepest sense of humility and highest level of reverence to the greater Houston, Hindus of Greater Houston, to the Meenakshi Temple, that we have come at a time, and we are calling it the 75th anniversary. We are giving awards to the 75 individuals because you participated in a process which will make this world a better place, a better civilization in the next 50 to 100 years. Now, when I was a child, actually I would say between 5 and 15, I used to recite as poetry or poem every day in our school prayers before the national anthem. And many of you know about it, but I want to sort of share that prayer with you because that indeed shaped much of my thinking. And that prayer goes this way: Om Shahana Vavatu, Shahana Vunaktu, Shaharaviram Karvaya Vahi, Tejashvina Vadita Vatsu, Ma Padisvishai Vahi, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And as you know, all of you know about this prayer, but I personally feel this prayer captures the spirit of Hinduism. Why? Because we talk about peace in me, peace in all of us, peace in the environment, and peace in the divine forces. And together it is celebrated in the term Om. And Om, as I understand, is one of the most fundamental vibrations of the universe. It began with the beginning of the universe, and it is eternal. It is a tremendous meaning. It is intrinsic, internal. It is also transcendental and external. And these vibrations of Om has a tremendous meaning. And that is what I think we have to present to the world. Now, as Partha was talking about, I have grown up as a gypsy. In the last 40 years, I spent working for governments, for corporates, as a management consultant, as a problem solver. I was a partner in McKinsey & Company, then I ran my own firm. But that gave me a very unique privilege to understand various communities around the world, understand various problems around the world, understand the shortcomings in our thinking, even in our leaders around the world. So I would build on that experience to share with you what I have learned as a humble student and which I continue to learn. So today I will speak to you not as an Indian, not as an American, not as a citizen of any city, but as a global citizen in service of humanity, which is literally crying for change. So in that spirit, the logic that I would like to put forward, that if you look at the last 500 years of the development of civilization, it has been based on a zero-sum logic. That you win, I lose, you win, and basic thinking have been zero-sum. And that's why you see so many conflicts, which I want to discuss with you briefly. And my challenge, and our challenge, all of our challenge, is to position the Vedic philosophy at the center of development of the civilization to develop what I call the plus-sum logic. That we don't win, we don't lose, we all win together. And that is the divinity that I understand Hinduism celebrates. And that's what we have to do, and we'll talk about it. So in that spirit, I will talk about 3 points. First, I want to give you a little bit of a view of where we are as a civilization. I think it's very important to understand. And then I will talk why we are having so many difficulties today. What is the root cause? And then I will talk about, to come out of these problems, why Vedic philosophy or Hinduism has a very important role to play. So this is the story I think we have to share. When Mr. Agarwal was talking about the story is where we are, what is the problem, and how could the Vedic philosophy bring us out of the problem to create the new paradigm of development of the civilization, which is equitable, which is sustainable, which is ethical. And that's what I feel I have learned from Hinduism. So first, let me spend a few moments. I'll take a time machine with you. A time machine will travel together. I'll not go too far away, but only 130 years. And you know, the first major effort of global peace was made in Chicago in the first Parliament of Religions, which was organized by folks in Boston, where I come from, and people in Chicago. And in that particular conference, as you know, all of you know, Swami Vivekananda spoke, and this is what he shared, and I want to share that with you. Sectarism, bigotry, and horrible descendant and fanatism have long possessed this earth. Mark the word, long possessed. They have filled the earth with violence, which is true, destroyed civilizations, and set whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would have been far more advanced than it is now. And unfortunately, 130 years from now, which is today, we can almost say the same thing. It's September 10th, he gave his speech on September 11th, 130 years ago. And we are at the same place, if not worse, because, as you know, since the first Parliament of Religions, very interesting things happened. That conference triggered another conference in Hague in 1899. And the purpose of that conference was to avoid wars, resolve conflicts, and it was a very successful conference, as I understand, in Hague. But unfortunately, within 2 years, there was a mass genocide in Congo, in a Belgian-Congo war. Then the World War I happened. 20 million people lost their lives. And then we formed the League of Nations. But that did not rescue us. We had the Second World War. I think 60 million people lost their lives. And then United Nations was formed. And since 1945 and today, the world has lost another 20 million people. So as you could see, the intentions were always there. But in spite of the intentions, the world has continued from one conflict to another conflict. And right now, as you know, in the center of Europe, there's a major war going on between Russia and Ukraine. There's a problem in South China Sea. There's a problem in the Korean Peninsula. And even this country, as you know, there's a lot of struggle with how to keep democracy alive. So we have a serious problem. And we have to change. Now, the question that I ask, why so? The intentions are there, the temples are there, churches are there, mosques are there, and these conferences happen in regular intervals, but the conflicts also continue in regular intervals. Why? And that's the question I'd like to answer with you. And that's what I was thinking while I was sitting there, because I had a different talk in my mind. I feel, that leads to my second question, why we have the problem. If you look at the last 500 years, particularly after the Industrial Revolution, there are two fundamental equations have shaped our thinking. They shaped how the organizations run, whether business, government, or international agencies. The first, Adam Smith, power of self-interest. And there's a fundamental belief, if self-interest is served, economic progress is made. But the other side of self-interest is we become selfish. And the second equation that served the development of civilizations was Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest, which was not coined by Charles Darwin, by the way. It was coined by Mr. I think Spencer, Herbert Spencer, anthropologist. And if you look at the mix of these two plays, self-interest and survival of the fittest, what does it tell you? It gives you the answer why we have conflicts. The survival of the fittest ultimately means there's only one species that will survive, and species will fight with each other in the spirit of self-interest. So I think time has come that we have to work with a fundamentally different equation at the heart of every organization in the world. So we are not talking about Indian philosophy and Hinduism in isolation. And Hindu philosophy never believed in one region, it believed in the entire universe. And it is high time that we take forward that story to create the new equation based on some of the philosophical constructs which has defined what I would call Vedicism, Hinduism, as we read in Upanishads, as we read in various Shastras, including Gita. So, next few moments I want to talk about how to switch from zero-sum logic to a plus-sum logic, and the role Hinduism could play, the role we could play, the role Meenakshi Temple could play, and that too, and Houston, which is full of energy. But before I do that, I would like to share with you what is the nature of the world in the future. Because we have to position this philosophy not based on what has happened in the past. Of course, we should understand why the past that we have seen, the conflicts that I talked about, could not sort of continue to happen. But we have to also think of, as Mr. Agarwal was talking about, the new world which is emerging, because that's what the world, the youth in this room has to solve. First, technology, we are hyper-connected. The world has really become one. So when we talk about one humanity, technologically is happening, but the other side of this connectivity, there's a plus side and the minus side. There's a lot of colored information, colored by different individuals differently. We do not know what is the truth. And that is the challenge of the 21st century. What is the truth? And when we are talking about Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth, we have to find a way to position this eternal truth in the context of hyperconnectivity. That's point number one. Point number two, we are moving from the industrial world to the knowledge economy, where the importance of physical borders is becoming less relevant because knowledge is volatile, knowledge do not have boundaries, knowledge can move from one end of the world to another end of the world in the speed of light. So we have to think of how to celebrate Hinduism, Vedicism, in the context of what Hinduism has been talking about for the last 7,000 years. It is the oneness, and that oneness, how it should work in a world where physical borders are becoming less relevant. But it's a very important point. People would get more and more connected with their local ecosystem, because that's what happened because of COVID, and their viruses are there. And I think we will see more inshoring, more people's ability to connect with the local environment to appreciate the local ecosystem. And that is very important. And India is a great example, as you know, is a country of 1,610 languages, not dialects, languages. And each of the languages have got about 4,000, 5,000 years of history. So they are rich. So the question would be, how do we one side celebrate universality, on the other side, specificity of each local environment? And finally, as you know, thanks to Elon Musk and many others, we are traveling to space. It's a very good sign, because that immediately says that we have to think in third dimension, where humanity together would explore the space. So technologically, we are at a point where everything is suggesting that we have to position the Vedic philosophy in this new context of one humanity. So we are in the perfect confluence, and I'm glad we are having this discussion on the 75th birthday of, I would say, Independence Day of Indian subcontinent. The book that I just shared with Partho is a book that I've just recently published, India Towards 100, Need for a Fundamental Reset. So it is for all of you, but it is available on Amazon. You can look for that book. India Towards 100, it basically talks about how Vedic philosophy is the one which will not only help India to come out of its socioeconomic challenges, but how India could position the philosophy to create the next phase of civilization. Now, on the other side, let's understand the problems that we have to face. It is true, the challenges that the world has to deal with would be climate, increasing gap between rich and poor, human migration, scarcity of supply of materials, whether it's hydrocarbon or lithium, there's limited supply. And of course, the biggest challenge is mistrust in institutions. People don't trust United Nations, people don't trust government institutions, and that is not only in this country, I see the sense that all over the world. So we do have some common challenges, and we have to solve them. So that brings me to the core of this evening, that what have we learned in last 7,000 years of intellectual and spiritual ferment in the foothills of Himalayas down to the Deccan Plateau, in the banks of Gangetic as well as the Indus Valley. And that's where the sages, the monks have resided for years, thousands of years, these shastras that we are talking about today, and how we could take the essence of their teaching into the future. So when I read the Vedas, which I do time to time, obviously I'm not an expert on the subject. When I read the Gitas, I take three messages. The first message is know thyself. Explore the spiritual vector inside you. And that's what also I'm glad Mr. Agarwal was talking about. It's extremely important, which we call in Sanskrit Atma, understanding the divine spirit within, so we can connect the spirit with the world outside. And I think that's extremely important. The second, harmony with nature. If anything that we have not managed in the last 500 years since the Industrial Revolution is that harmony with nature. We have exploited the nature, we have exploited people, and that you see all over, including in India, including in this country, and the harmony with nature has been disturbed. It is now understood with the problems that we are facing in the climate, the rising sea levels, the melting glaciers in the north and south, basically indicates that the fundamental message of Vedic philosophy becomes now central to the development of our civilization, which is harmony with nature. And the third, which Swami Vivekananda is to say beautifully, I'll first say it in Bengali, then I'll translate in English. He used to say, Jibe prem kore jei jon, shei jon shebiche ishwar, which means, which is the fundamental of Indian philosophy, by the way, which says, one who serves human beings around you, he is serving God. In other words, in every individual there's God, we serve that Atma. Now, if you take these 3 points that I just made, which is know thyself, harmony with nature, and service to society, where God resides in each and every individual, you would be able to change the past equation of the 500 years, which has been exploitative relationship with nature. Even Karl Marx talked about more commodities people produce, they get commoditized. And that's why you see the gap between rich and poor. The Occupy Wall Street movement was real, but it is another kind of exploitation. So I think we have to move from this exploitative relationship to what I will call enlightened relationship. And that is the essence of Hinduism. So now comes the real question. We have been discussing this. Swami Vivekananda discussed that. We have temples all over the world. I've been very much been part of Ramakrishna Mission and Vedanta Center. I've also had the privilege to meet Mother Teresa in Calcutta. I've been in the world of temples, churches, mosques around the world. But the point here is why we still have the problems. Because we have these functions. We have the ceremonies. We recite the shastras, the mantras. But when it comes to day-to-day life, somehow something is missing. And that's where I feel the temples of this country, the temples in India first, have to move from the spiritual and ceremonial part to the practical part of Vedicism, which Swami Vivekananda talk about, that how do I practice each and every moment, whether I'm performing on the stage, whether I'm putting up a show on the screen, how do I do it perfectly? Because that's what defines Vedicism. So I would like to make 7 points. I will not discuss them because I don't have that much time. But the first thing that we have to celebrate in name of Vedicism, what I call the 360-degree discipline of excellence. Discipline of excellence. That's what the Shastras talk about. That for each and every task that we take, we have to believe we are conducting this task as a prayer to God. Do we do that? Please ask yourself, do we do that? Second, work ethics. What does work ethics really mean? We talk about it. But I saw that in Japan. That when you take into account every details and believe that every details count, whether I'm organizing this mic or with this podium or this stage, am I taking care of the details? That counts. And that's one thing I saw celebrated beautifully in Japan. I'll speak a little bit about Japan because that's where I see Vedic philosophy is being practiced. And I'll talk about it a bit later. Third, value of time, timeliness. Because that's the most precious gift God has given us. But do we value time? Do we start our functions on time? Do we start our ceremonies on time? The timeliness. And that too, I saw that in Japan. If something was 1 second late, Japanese people felt highly, to be honest, was ashamed. Fourth, clean habits. Whether we go to the toilet or go to the kitchen, things are clean. Again, I saw that in Japan. I think we have to celebrate that because that's where we have to, again, honor God. Because what is God talking about? What is Arjun, when Arjun and Sri Krishna was talking in Gita, he's talking about conservation of material, conservation of strength, conservation of energy. And that comes only when we have clean habits. Then social consciousness, the spirit of public service, which I'm so delighted to see in this room. I think we have to spread that, the spirit of public service, spirit of giving. And the seventh is what I think Mr. Agarwal talked about, is the spirit of inquiry. Because Sanatan Dharma becomes only Sanatan when we can continue to celebrate the spirit of questioning, the spirit of inquiry. So when I bring everything together, I feel our real challenge as a group, people with the Indian heritage, on one side keep the story alive, but to make the story relevant for the civilization across the world, I think it's important that our behavioral capital is not the knowledge capital, not the skills, not the shastras, not the mantras. They're all important, extremely important. But our behavioral capital, which is how do I act every moment, how I express my humility, how do I express my thoughts, how do I respect each other, how do I respect time, that's where we have to work. So my humble request to all of us, including myself, and I made the point in India in the next 25 years, if we can fix the behavioral capital by 2047, India would be in a position, Indian philosophy would be in a position, Hinduism would be in a position, Vedicism would be in a position to define much needed next phase of the global civilization. With that, I'd like to thank you very much. I'm so excited to see everything that you are doing. Thank you very much. Thank you.